Have you ever wondered what really happens on deserted American roads in the early hours of the morning? What do paramedics find when they are called to accidents in places where no one should be? What if I told you that some of the victims we transport should never have been alive? What would you do if you discovered that the person in the back seat of the ambulance wasn't human? My name is Marcus Sullivan. I'm 52 years old, and I've worked as a paramedic for 28 years in the state of California. I'm the most senior paramedic at the Central County EMS station in Bakersfield. I've seen it all on these roads: fatal accidents, overdoses, shootings, births on highways. I thought nothing could shock me anymore, but I was wrong. There are things happening on American roads in the early hours of the morning that defy any medical or logical explanation. Calls that don't appear in any official report. Victims who simply disappear from our records. During nearly 3 decades driving ambulances on the highways of California, Nevada, and Arizona, I witnessed 3 cases that completely changed my perception of what is real and what is not. 3 nights that haunt me to this day, even after all these years. What I'm about to tell you are true stories. They happened to me. I don't expect you to believe me, but I need to get this off my chest, because some memories don't let us sleep peacefully. Story 1. The Interstate 40 accident, Arizona, November 2008. It was a cold November night. My partner at the time, Derek Thompson, and I were covering the night shift. Derek was only 24, a recent graduate, full of energy and enthusiasm. I always enjoyed working with him. He was competent, quick, and kept his cool under pressure. We received the call at 2:37 a.m. Car accident on Interstate 40, about 45 miles west of Kingman, Arizona. A completely deserted area, nothing but dark desert on all sides. The dispatcher said it was a single vehicle accident, a sedan that had rolled over several times. What struck me as odd from the start was the dispatcher's tone of voice. There was something hesitant in the way he conveyed the information, as if he were reading something that didn't make sense to him. We turned on the emergency lights and sped down the interstate. Derek was driving. I was mentally reviewing the rollover trauma protocols. 45 minutes later, we arrived at the scene. The dinner was disturbing. A silver Toyota Camry lay completely wrecked, upside down about 30 meters from the highway. Shattered glass glittered under our headlights like diamonds scattered across the asphalt. There were long, erratic skid marks, the kind that indicate a total loss of control. But what chilled me was the complete absence of other vehicles. No one had reported the accident. Not a single police car yet, no witnesses. Just us, that wrecked car, and the silent desert. Derek grabbed the trauma kit. I grabbed the emergency bag and the immobilization board. We approached the vehicle cautiously. The flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the twisted metal. That's when I heard a faint sound, almost imperceptible. It was coming from inside the car. Someone was banging on the inside of the vehicle, on the inside of the trunk. Derek looked at me. I saw the fear in his eyes, but also the determination. We were paramedics. Our mission was to save lives. No matter how strange the situation, we approached the rear of the vehicle. The trunk was dented, but not completely closed. Derek used a crowbar that we always carry and forced it open. What we saw inside that trunk haunts me to this day. It was a woman. She appeared to be about 30 years old, with long brown hair, wearing a white dress that was completely blood-stained. She was curled up in a fetal position, trembling violently. But the most disturbing thing was not her physical state. It was her eyes. When our flashlight illuminated her face, she looked directly at me. And her eyes, Jesus Christ, her eyes were completely black. There was no iris, no white, just absolute darkness, as if we were looking into 2 empty holes. Derek instinctively recoiled. I felt my heart race, but I forced myself to maintain my professional composure. "Ma'am, I'm paramedic Marcus Sullivan. We're going to get you out of there. Can you tell me where you're feeling pain?" She didn't answer. She just kept staring at me with those impossible eyes. Then very slowly she reached out her hand towards me. Her skin was as cold as ice when I touched it. Too cold. No living human being has skin that cold. But she was breathing. I could see her chest rising and falling. We helped her out of the trunk. She could barely stand. So Derek supported her while I quickly examined her injuries. There was blood, a lot of blood. But when I tried to locate the source of the bleeding, I didn't find any open wounds. The blood was there, soaking her dress, but there were no cuts, no lacerations, nothing. Derek, put the cervical collar on her. We'll take her to the ambulance and do a full assessment inside. We walked slowly to the ambulance. The woman made no sound. She didn't groan in pain, she didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just walked among us like an automaton, those dark eyes fixed ahead. We placed her on a stretcher inside the ambulance. I began checking her vital signs, and that's when things got even stranger. Blood pressure, undetectable. Pulse, undetectable. Oxygen saturation, the monitor could not read. Body temperature was 84 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature indicative of severe hypothermia, inconsistent with consciousness. But she was awake, looking at me. Derek, there's something wrong with the equipment. Bring the backup kit. Derek ran off to get another monitor. I was alone with her for maybe 20 seconds. 20 seconds that felt like an eternity. That's when she spoke. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. But what she said, it made my blood run cold. He comes to take away those who no longer belong. I froze. What? Who's coming to pick me up? She didn't answer. She just kept staring at me with those empty eyes. Derek returned with the backup equipment. We connected everything again. Same reading. No detectable vital signs. Marcus, this is not possible. She is clinically dead. I looked at the woman. She tilted her head slightly, as if she were studying Derek with curiosity. It was at that moment that we heard it. A sound coming from outside the ambulance. A sound that shouldn't be there in the middle of the desert at 3 in the morning. Footsteps, multiple, heavy, approaching. Derek opened the back door of the ambulance and looked out. I saw his face pale. Marcus, there are people approaching. Lots of people. I looked out the side window, and I felt my stomach churn. There were at least 20 figures walking toward us. They came from all directions, emerging from the darkness of the desert. Their silhouettes were humanoid, but there was something profoundly wrong with how they moved. They walked in a disjointed way, like puppets being pulled by invisible strings, and they all had the same empty black eyes. Derek, drive now. He didn't even question it. He jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The figures began running toward us with inhuman speed. That's when the woman on the stretcher stood up. He simply sat down, removing all the monitors from his body. He looked at me one last time and said, "Thank you for trying, but you can't save what's already been taken." Then she opened the back door of the ambulance while we were still starting to accelerate and jumped out. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. She landed perfectly on the asphalt, as if she had jumped from a height of only a few centimeters, not from a moving ambulance. The other figures immediately surrounded her, and together they simply disappeared into the darkness. Derek sped up until we were back on the main highway. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We drove straight to the nearest hospital in Kingman. When we arrived, trembling and sweating, we tried to report what had happened. But when they checked our records, there was no record of any call for that location. The dispatcher denied sending any unit to Interstate 40 that night. The accident never officially happened. We returned to the scene the following morning with a police team. There was no Toyota Camry, no wreckage, no skid marks, nothing. Derek requested a transfer 2 weeks later. He said he couldn't work the night shift anymore. I don't blame him. I kept going, but I never drove that stretch of Interstate 40 again without feeling that chill down my spine. Because sometimes On the darkest nights, I can still hear that whisper in my mind. He comes to take away those who no longer belong. Story 2. The Highway 95 Call, Nevada, March 2014. 6 years after the Interstate 40 incident, I had practically convinced myself that it had been an isolated episode. Maybe a collective hallucination caused by exhaustion. Maybe something we ate. The human brain is capable of playing strange tricks when deprived of sleep. But what happened in March 2014 completely shattered that illusion of comfort. I was working with a new partner, a woman named Rachel Mendez. Rachel was exceptional. 10 years of experience, training in remote area rescue, advanced trauma certification. She was one of the best paramedics I've ever known. Professional, focused, courageous. We were covering a hospital transfer route that took us along Highway 95 in Nevada, one of the loneliest and most desolate roads in the United States. That region is known as the extraterrestrial highway because of the frequent UFO sightings near Area 51. I never believed in those flying saucer stories, but after that night, well, let's just say my worldview became more flexible. It was a moonless night. The kind of darkness that only exists in truly remote places, far from any light pollution. We were returning from a patient transfer in Las Vegas, heading back to our base in Tonopah. 2 hours on a practically empty road. We had been on the road for about 45 minutes when Rachel slowed down. "Marcus, are you seeing that?" I looked where she was pointing. Ahead, on the right side of the highway, there was something strange, a light. But it wasn't a normal light. It was a pulsating luminosity, an intense electric blue that seemed to float a few meters above the ground. "Probably some kind of signaling," I replied, though it didn't sound convincing even to myself. As we approached, the light began to move, not in a mechanical or predictable way, but with erratic, almost organic movements. It rose, fell, slid sideways. "That's definitely not a signal," Rachel murmured. "That's when we received the call over the radio. Unit 7-2, we have a report of an accident with a victim on Highway 95, mile 167. Vehicle overturned. One victim ejected. High priority." Rachel looked at the GPS. "Marcus, we're exactly at mile 167. We looked around. There were no overturned vehicles, no wreckage, just that strange blue light floating in the darkness. Dispatcher, this is Unit 7-2. We arrived at the location but did not see any accident. Can you confirm the coordinates?" The radio went silent. Then a response that sent shivers down my spine. "Unit 7-2, we have no record of a call for your position. What is your current location?" Rachel and I exchanged glances. "Dispatcher, we just received a call from that center literally 30 seconds ago. Accident at mile 167 of Highway 95. Negative, Unit 7-2. We did not originate any call. The last record was 47 minutes ago. Are you all right?" My hand was gripping the radio so tightly that my knuckles were white. That's when we heard the scream. It was a woman's scream, sharp and desperate, coming from the direction where that blue light floated. It wasn't an ordinary scream of pain. It was a scream of pure terror, the kind we only hear when someone is facing something incomprehensible. Rachel was already opening the door. "We have to check." "Rachel, Hope," but she had already grabbed her emergency backpack and was running towards the sound. Damn it! I grabbed my flashlight and followed her. We left the highway and descended a small rocky slope. The blue light was about 100 meters ahead of us, pulsing more intensely now. And below it, there was a woman kneeling on the desert floor. She was wearing a light dress, completely unsuitable for the cold desert night. Her blonde hair was disheveled, falling over her face. She had her hands covering her ears and rocked her body back and forth, like a child in distress. "Mom!" Rachel shouted as we ran. "We're here to help. Are you hurt?" The woman didn't answer. She just kept swaying, murmuring something we couldn't understand. As we drew closer, the blue light suddenly shot upward into the sky with impossible speed, leaving a luminous trail before disappearing completely. The darkness that returned was absolute and suffocating. Rachel knelt beside the woman. "Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm a paramedic. Could you take a look at me?" Slowly, the woman lowered her hands from her face. I wish I had never seen what was underneath. His face was wrong. His eyes were open, but his pupils were completely dilated, filling almost the entire iris. His skin had a deathly pallor, and there were dark, bulging veins pulsing on his neck and cheeks as if something were moving beneath the skin. But the worst part was the expression. It was the look of someone who had seen something the human mind wasn't made to process. They took me," she whispered. "They showed me. Jesus Christ, they showed me." "Who took you?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Those who watch, those who walk among. They took me. They took me out of the car. They took me upstairs. So cold, so dark. And those eyes, those damned eyes." Rachel was checking her vital signs. Rapid pulse, elevated blood pressure, temperature of 95 degrees, mild hypothermia. "We need to get her to the ambulance," Rachel said. "Ma'am, can you walk?" The woman grabbed my arm with surprising force. Her nails dug into my skin. "You don't understand. They put something in me. I feel it moving. I feel it inside me." She started screaming, scratching her own stomach with her nails. Rachel tried to hold her back. "Marcus, we need to sedate her. She's going to hurt herself." I was reaching for the backpack to get the sedative when the woman suddenly stopped screaming. She became completely rigid, as if she had been frozen in place. Her dilated eyes fixed on something behind us. Rachel and I turned slowly. About 30 meters away, there were 3 figures standing. They were humanoids, but their proportions were off. Too tall, too thin, disproportionately long limbs. And even in the darkness, I could see that their heads were too big, and where their eyes should have been, there was only that pulsating blue light. None of us moved. It was as if we were trapped in an invisible force field. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't move my fingers. I could only stare at those impossible things. One of them began to approach. It wasn't walking, it was gliding. It floated millimeters above the ground, moving toward us with unnatural smoothness. The woman began to cry. They weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pure existential terror. "Please, no, not again, please." The creature stopped a few meters from us. Up close, I could see that its skin had a strange, almost translucent texture, as if it weren't made of solid matter. And those bright blue eyes seemed to look right through us, not at us. Then we heard it in our minds. It wasn't a voice, it was more like thoughts being forced into our consciousness, words that weren't words. Incomplete. Process interrupted. Return for completion. The woman began to be dragged toward the creatures, not by physical hands. She simply began to slide across the ground as if pulled by invisible ropes, screaming and struggling in vain. It was Rachel who broke the trance. She pulled out her high-powered tactical flashlight and pointed it directly at the creature. The beam of light struck the figure squarely, and it reacted. It recoiled violently, emitting a high-pitched sound that wasn't audible to the ears, but which I felt directly in my bones, vibrating in my rib cage. "Run!" Rachel shouted. She grabbed the woman and I helped. We ran back to the ambulance, the adrenaline giving us superhuman strength. I didn't look back. I didn't care if they were following us. We threw the woman into the back of the ambulance. Rachel jumped into the driver's seat and sped off before I could even close the back door completely. We left there at 90 miles per hour, breaking all safety protocols. I looked out the back window of the ambulance. The 3 figures were standing in the middle of the highway, getting smaller and smaller as we drove away. Those blue lights above their heads flashed in sync, as if they were communicating. Then, in the blink of an eye, they simply disappeared. The woman was in a catatonic state in the back of the ambulance. We took her to the nearest hospital, a small medical center in Tonopah. The emergency doctors examined her thoroughly, and they found absolutely nothing wrong. No signs of trauma, no injuries. All the tests were normal, except for one thing. There was a small mark on his abdomen, a perfectly circular scar, perhaps half a centimeter in diameter. The skin around it was slightly burned, as if by a precision surgical laser. But when doctors tried to do a biopsy of the area, it simply disappeared. The mark vanished completely, as if it had never existed. The woman woke up 2 days later with no memory of the events. She said the last thing she remembered was driving along Highway 95 at night. And then, nothing, a complete void. Rachel and I completed our reports. Officially, we recorded it as patient found disoriented as a result of a possible vehicle accident, transferred to hospital care. We didn't mention the creatures, we didn't mention the lights. Who would believe it? But ever since that night, every time I drive on Highway 95 after sunset, I keep my high-powered tactical flashlight in the passenger seat, because now I know there are things out there, things that watch, things that catch, and light is the only thing that keeps them apart. History 3. The Last Call. California, October 2023. This is the story that made me seriously consider retirement. It was only last year. Recent. Still fresh in my mind as if it happened yesterday. It was Halloween, which already adds a disturbing layer of irony to all of this. I was on duty with a new partner, a guy named Tyler Chen. First year as a paramedic. Good kid. Smart. Talented. He reminded me of Derek from many years ago. Perhaps that's why I was so terrified by what happened. The shift was surprisingly calm for a Halloween night. We expected the typical chaos, overdoses, alcohol poisoning, accidents caused by costume drivers. But by 11:30 p.m., we had only received 3 routine calls. Tyler was excited. It was his first Halloween working as a paramedic, and he had contagious energy. "Marcus, do you believe in ghosts?" he asked as we drove back to base after dropping off a patient. I laughed bitterly. "Tyler, after 28 years in this job, I believe there are things in this world that go far beyond ghosts." He was about to ask what I meant when the radio crackled. "Unit 3-1, we have a priority call. Serious accident on Route 58 near Carrizo Plain National Monument. Multiple victims, head-on collision, possible fatalities. All available units should respond." Tyler looked at me. Carrizo Plain was one of the most isolated places in California. A national monument in the middle of a vast desert plateau. Minimal population, minimal traffic, and virtually no cell phone coverage. Unit 3-1 receiving, on the way. Tyler turned on the emergency lights and sped off. We would have about 35 minutes to get there. As we drew closer, the feeling of unease grew. It was difficult to explain. There was no rational reason for it, but my instinct, that same instinct that has kept me alive for almost 3 decades in this job, was screaming that something was profoundly wrong. Route 58 cut through the Carrizo Plain like a knife, completely straight in some stretches, winding in others. That night, it was enveloped in a dense, unnatural fog that seemed to have sprung from nowhere. "What a strange fog," Tyler murmured, slowing down. "Visibility is terrible." We turned on the fog lights and proceeded cautiously. That's when we finally arrived at the site of the alleged accident. What we saw was disturbing in its strangeness. There were 2 vehicles, a black Ford F-150 pickup truck and a silver Honda Accord sedan. Both were stopped in the middle of the highway, facing each other as if they were about to collide. But there was no sign of an impact, no damage, no wreckage, no broken glass. Both cars were perfectly intact, simply parked there, engines off, headlights off. Tyler parked the ambulance and looked at me, confused. "Where's the accident?" "I don't know, but stay alert." We got out of the ambulance with our medical kits. The fog was so thick we could barely see beyond a few meters. The silence was oppressive. There was no wind. There were no animal sounds, just a dead, suffocating silence. We approached the pickup truck. Tyler illuminated the interior with his flashlight. There was someone in the driver's seat, a middle-aged man wearing a denim jacket. He was sitting perfectly still, with his hands on the steering wheel in the 10 and 2 positions, staring straight ahead through the windshield. "Sir," Tyler knocked on the window. "Sir, are you okay? We're paramedics." The man didn't react. He didn't even blink. He just kept staring straight ahead with that empty look. I tried to open the door. It wasn't locked. The door opened with a soft creak. "Sir, I need you to look at me. Have you been in an accident?" Nothing. Her skin was as pale as paper, but when I put my hand on her neck to check her pulse, it was warm, pulse present, 72 beats per minute, perfectly normal. "Marcus, there's someone in the other car too." I looked at the Honda. Tyler was right. There was a figure in the driver's seat. A young woman, looking about 25, with dark hair, and she was in exactly the same position, hands on the steering wheel, gaze fixed ahead, completely still. A shiver ran down my spine. "Tyler, this isn't right." "What do you mean?" "Look at them. Look at their positions. It's as if they were driving. But the cars are off, and they didn't react to our arrival." Tyler approached the Honda and tried to make contact with the woman. Same response. None. She was there, alive, breathing, with normal vital signs, but completely disconnected. That's when I realized something even more disturbing. The headlights of both vehicles were pointed at each other, as if, in the moment before impact, both drivers had simply stopped, frozen in time. "Tyler, we need to get them out of those vehicles. Something is very wrong here." We started to remove the man from the pickup truck. He didn't resist, but he didn't help either. It was like moving a mannequin. His muscles were relaxed, but there was something robotic about the way his body moved. That's when his radio crackled. But what came out wasn't words. It was a static, choppy sound with something that seemed like voices. Multiple voices whispering at the same time, overlapping, creating a disturbing cacophony. And then, very clearly, amidst the static, we heard, "They mustn't wake up. Interrupt the cycle. They mustn't wake up." Tyler dropped the radio as if he had burned his hand. What the hell was that? Before I could respond, all the ambulance's electrical systems suddenly shut down. Emergency lights went out. Engine died. Everything. Total electrical silence. And in the darkness and fog, we listened. Steps. These weren't normal footsteps. They were heavy, dragging, numerous, coming from all directions around us. As if we were surrounded by dozens of people walking in a circle, always getting closer, but never arriving. "Marcus, there are people out there." "I know. Stay close to me." We pointed our flashlights in the direction of the sounds. The beams of light cut through the fog, but revealed nothing. The fog simply swallowed the light. That's when the pickup truck driver spoke. His voice was monotonous, emotionless, like a recording device reproducing words. "Oh, you shouldn't have come." Tyler and I turned to him. His eyes were still fixed ahead, but his mouth was moving, forming the words mechanically. "This is no place for the living. This is the way of those who are trapped, of those who journey eternally between departure and arrival." "Sir, you need medical help," I started to say, but he kept talking, completely ignoring me. Every night we drive. Every night the accident happens. Every night we die, and every night it starts again. This is our cycle, this is our road, and you must not interrupt it." The woman in the Honda started speaking at the same time, in the same monotonous voice. Get out now, before you get trapped too, before you become just another one on the eternal path." The footsteps around us grew louder, closer, and through the fog, we began to see silhouettes, dozens of them, hundreds, all standing on the edges of the highway, perfectly still, staring in our direction. "Tyler, get back in the ambulance, now!" We ran. Tyler managed to start the engine on the third try. Thank God. We sped away from there, the emergency lights coming back on. I looked in the rearview mirror. The man and woman were still standing in the middle of the highway, But now, hundreds of other figures had joined them, all standing still, all looking in the direction we had gone. And then, as we watched, the two vehicles, the pickup truck and the Honda, simply vanished, in the blink of an eye, as if they had never been there. The figures remained for a few more seconds. Then, one by one, they too began to disappear, merging into the mist until nothing was left. When we returned with a police team 2 hours later, there was no trace of any vehicles, no tire tracks, no evidence that anything had been there. The most disturbing part, when we checked the dispatcher's records, we discovered that the original call had never been made, no accident report, no request for help. Someone or something drew us to that place, and to this day, I don't know why. I don't know what those things are. I don't know if they're ghosts of people who died on that road, trapped in some kind of time loop. I don't know if it's something worse. What I know is that Tyler quit the following week. He said he couldn't take it anymore, that every time he closed his eyes, he saw those hundreds of figures standing in the fog, staring at him. I understand completely, because even now, a year later, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night hearing that monotonous voice repeating, "This is the way of those who are trapped, of those who journey eternally between departure and arrival." Conclusion. These are my 3 stories, 3 nights that changed my perception of what is possible in this world. Today, I am 52 years old, 28 years of service as a paramedic, 28 years driving along the loneliest and most isolated roads in the United States, responding to calls in the darkest hours of the night. I saved hundreds of lives. I witnessed thousands of tragedies. I saw the best and the worst of humanity. But those 3 nights showed me that there is something more out there, something that exists on the margins of our reality, in forgotten places, on deserted roads where the light doesn't reach. I continue working. I continue answering calls because it's my duty, my purpose. But now, when I drive on highways at night, I always keep my tactical flashlight handy. I always double-check every call with the dispatcher, and I never, ever stop in isolated places without a very good reason, because I learned 3 lessons on those roads. First, not everyone who needs help is still alive. Second, some lights in the darkness should not be followed. Third, there are roads in this world that lead to places you never return from. What if you're ever driving late at night on a deserted road and you see something strange? A pulsating light that follows you, figures standing still in the fog, or a call for an accident that doesn't exist. Please, don't stop. Keep driving and never look back, because some things on American roads just don't want to be saved. They want company forever. When night falls on America's deserted highways, paramedics become witnesses to a reality that defies all logic. These are stories that don't appear in official reports, but they happen every night, somewhere, to someone.